Okay, so welcome back to Lawrence Explains Online Academic Tuition. So in this video, I'm gonna take a look at the text An Inspector Calls by J.B. Priestley. Now, I'm gonna take a look at it from a different angle to any other angle that I've seen out there. And I'm surprised it's not been looked at from this angle yet, but I'm going to take a look at it from a social, political, historical viewpoint, and I'm actually going to analyze Priestley's thesis and the quote-unquote moral lessons or supposed lessons that are delivered in this story. So there are lots of videos out there about the play and about scoring high marks on this exam. And so there's plenty of material out there for you already, and I thought I would do something a little bit different in this video. And essentially what I'm going to be doing is challenging all of the theses put forward by Priestley. Well, I think I'm actually going to be obliterating them because I have a lot of empirical evidence from the last 70 years of history. Let's start to do that. So first of all, just to I suppose give Priestley his credit as a writer. The social vision that he puts forward, which I believe is a complete absurdity, does not take away from his tremendous skill as a writer and his skill as a dramatist. It's a very well constructed play. The characters are very compelling. And the tension and the management of information in the play is absolutely brilliant. So it's a very good play. But I'm going to take on many aspects of this play, and I think it's probably going to take me a couple of videos to do so. So what I thought I would do first of all would be just to start with the character of Eva Smith. Okay, Eva Smith. Obviously the central figure in the play, who we never actually meet, and I'm going to do a little bit of analysis on her, and just to think about, whether this person is even remotely realistic as a character, because the play purports to be a kind of social analysis. Obviously her name, Eva, Eve, relating to all women, womankind, and Smith, the most common name. The most common English name. So the idea is that she is somehow representative of many, many people, many women. I'm going to come back to this idea of having one person be a representative avatar probably in another video, because it's something I think is absurd. I've never met two people who were identical. Never mind, millions and millions of people, as Priestley asserts about Eva Smiths and John Smiths. But let's just look at her as a character. So we're introduced to her, obviously, as the inspector arrives, and initially it is Mr. Burling who we kind of find out about his dealings with her. Basically, he fires her, essentially. He dismisses her. Probably dismisses is a better way of putting it. And let's just have a look at what he says about Eva. So I've just got back to the original play here. Let's try and just scroll down and see if we can find the reference. I'd like some information, if you don't mind, Mr. Burling. Okay, she was in great agony, etc., etc. Eva Smith, do you remember her? No. Doesn't convey anything to me. Okay, so he shows her the photo, and here we go. Yes, she was one of my employees, and then I discharged her. Is that why she committed suicide? Asked Eric. The girl left nearly 2 years ago. It must have been early in autumn of 1910. Yes, end of September 1910. And so let's find. So he talks about his company, Crofts Limited, and let's find the point here. So We have this quote from the inspector, because what happened to her there may have determined what happened to her afterwards, and what happened to her afterwards may have driven her to suicide, a chain of events. What does this assume about Eva Smith? This assumes that she is like the end dominoes that simply gets knocked down at the end of this long line of dominoes, and she has absolutely no input whatsoever. She has no willpower, she has no mind of her own, she has no ability to deal with her own issues and move forward and advance in the world in any way. It's an extremely patronizing view of Eva Smith. It's basically saying that she was completely passive in this situation. And it's basically contradicted in the very next section here. So, she'd been working, Burling talks about her, a good worker. They were ready to promote her. Okay? They were all rather restless, they wanted more money, and they refused. Burling refused, and then she was dismissed. There was a strike, and they let people come back, apart from the 4 or 5 ringleaders who started the trouble. I went down myself and told them to clear out, and Eva Smith was one of them. She had a lot to say, far too much, so she had to go. Okay, so again, we've got this contradiction here between the Eva Smith that is presented when it comes to the strike, who's this very feisty, loud, assertive young woman, and the Eva Smith that is presented in the rest of the play, who is this just complete passive victim who really has no ability to resolve any of her own issues, or no ability to even set basic boundaries in her relationships. So the character of Eva begins to be quite incoherent quite quickly. The other aspect as well of this is we're looking at responsibility here. Eva's led a strike. She's been part of a strike, part of leading a strike. She's doing very well in her work, and she was in line for a promotion. So by all accounts, by the account of Mr. Burling, things were going very well for her. She was doing very well. She was in line for a promotion. She was on the way up, which, as a woman in the type of situation that she in, which was precarious by virtue of the fact that she had no family, it would seem to be absolutely, literally career suicide, just really an insane thing to do, to go and lead a strike when you're on the border of a promotion. It's so counterproductive, it doesn't even make sense. Part of the responsibility for her dismissal has to be, her own involvement in this and her own leading of it. The inspector says, "Why did you refuse?" We're going to come back to Burling in a moment, but the point is, his duty is to keep labour costs down, and if they'd accepted it, I think it said it would have increased labour costs by, what was it? Was it 12%, something like that? Yeah, but the point is, if his labour costs have been increased, then he could potentially go out of business. Other competitors swoop in. The margins, although he's doing well, the margins aren't vast. They're not infinite. If labour costs go up, the amount you can invest in the business decreases, and that the following year is going to make you less competitive. So there's always a balance to be struck between wages, investment in the business, and then obviously profit and shareholders as well. So Mr. Burling's position is not necessarily a simple position. So I'm sure the character of Eva Smith was not considering this in the strike, but there's an incoherence to her character, as we see later on in the relationships with Gerald and and Eric, she is, I mean, how does she act with both of these men? I mean, she's completely passive in both situations. Gerald treats her actually very well. She's offered housing apropos of nothing, which is almost miraculous. Like, there's no young... If she'd happened to be a young man, Gerald wouldn't have offered her housing. So she's very fortunate in that sense that he just happened to be attracted to her and fell for her and so on. And she actually got this opportunity to have some housing for a while. Surely that will be an opportunity to go out and then to begin your life again, right? I can start from here, I'm going to go get a job again, or I'm gonna get myself back into work and get back on my feet. So it was strange that she just kind of lived in this delusional world when she was in Gerald's premises, and with Eric as well. She was completely passive. In both cases, she chose to enter into the relationships. She chose also to have sexual relationships with both of these men, despite the fact she knew she had no job, she had no family, and obviously these are pre-contraception days. So this is extremely risky behaviour that she's engaging in, and it's as if she had no input into this, which I find absolutely bizarre. And again, extremely patronising on the part of Priestley. This woman is just, at the beginning she's leading a strike, and then later on she's just this useless, flimsy kind of victim. In the case of Eric as well, the guy is clearly unsuitable to be around. He's drunk and so on, and that doesn't stop Eva Smith having a sexual relationship with him for over an extended period of time. So that there has to be some responsibility on her shoulders. Granted, she was badly treated by basically all of the members of the family, or not ideally treated, but she has to bear responsibility for her own actions, and it's a lot of her own actions got her into the situation that she eventually finds herself in, a situation of absolute desperation, which I still think would have potentially had some resolution as well. So that's the character of Eva Smith. There's probably not much in the notes here that you would take away, but I'm basically just encouraging you to think critically about this and think about Eva. Was she sensible in her approach of getting involved in the strike? Was it even realistic that Mr. Burling would have been able to give her the raise? Possible, but it's by no means a given. Given her position as someone with no family, basically living alone and doing well in work, you would think that she would basically have just taken a sensible approach and just decided to carry on getting on with work and succeeding and moving up the chain of command in the company, which is what she was doing. But she took the decision to go a different route and get involved in the protests. That being said, she is very fiery and very dynamic and assertive within the protest, to the point she's actually willing to speak to the owner of the company himself, and he says she had a lot to say for herself. So we were presented with this very fiery, strong young woman who seems to be in total contrast to the woman that we find later on in the play, who seems to have no direction, no ability to assert herself, assert her own boundaries, to act in the world. And so I find her to be an unrealistic character in that sense. Like, she can't be fiery one minute and strong, and the next minute she is this kind of floating victim. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But in order for the thesis of Priestley to be dramatically realized, we have to see this shift in her, even though it's incoherent. But we have to see the shift in her because it suits the purposes of the kind of social analysis and the social conclusions that Priestley has incorrectly drawn. So I'd encourage people to think about Eva Smith, think about her as a character. How realistic is she? Are there any points where she could have done better for herself? Like, did she did she take the correct actions, or did she take counterproductive actions? I would say there's at least 3 highly counterproductive moments in her life that we can see. One is getting involved in the strike. The other is getting involved with the 2 men as well, which was certainly in the case of Eric, it was certainly very misjudged. Possibly with Gerald as well, but we'll let that one pass. Certainly with the case of Eric, it was a really poor, counterproductive thing for her to do and be involved in. So Eva Smith is not this passive victim, this totem to be put forward as like, oh, we need to save her. I think she had a lot to do with it herself. I'd like to write an alternative ending, just where she finds her way through. She has the child. She finds her way through. She establishes some kind of an arrangement with Eric, and so on and so forth. That would be the type of ending I would like to see, where they actually resolve it, rather than this very tragic ending that happens. So I'm going to come back in the next clip, and I'm going to discuss the character of Mr. Burling, because I think he's an interesting character to analyse from a kind of sociological and economic point of view. So yeah, I will leave that one there.